So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the February Indicator of Behavior subproject meeting. My name is Charlie Frick. I'm your host and chair for the subproject, and just thought I'd get things kicked off for a moment. Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the research we've been doing on indicator of behaviors and our reference implementation. Uh, then talk about a little bit of logistics for a moment before getting into our technical talk for the month, which will be on the STIX Modeler project. So for starters, we've been taking the feedback from our members and working on a revision 3 of our main reference implementation. That would be the one based on the Reaper campaign that we've been using for a while. And the good news is we've finished our reviews of the STIX JSON and are in the process of working on our technical documentation. Hopefully at our next meeting or the one after that, we'll be able to take everybody through a quick walkthrough and overview of what features we've added. Mostly just trying to clean up the process and match the spec and incorporate the great feedback we've had for things like playbooks and detectors, and show how, ways that we can combine all that into a nice STIX 2.1 bundle, as well as we've been getting the extensions loaded up on the OCA STIX extension repository. And those are the main advancements we're working on that. That said, as we're getting to this revision 3, we're really seeing the initial part of this design phase of the IOB concept to get to a pretty good point, so that something I'll probably be posting up on the Slack as well as our listserv. I'd like to float the idea of maybe changing the frequency of the IOB calls. I'm not feeling that we're making as much massive changes that might need a monthly meeting, and think we might be better served going down to, say, a quarterly schedule. Happy to have more talk on that if anybody feels very strongly on that. But that's the current plan, is probably to hold the March meeting and then switch to a every 3 months plan for the future. And so we'll take people's feedback and see if there's any concerns, but that's one of the current plans we have going forward, and I'll get that coordinated with OASIS and OCA, so we'll be able to get the right updates, and we'll send messages through the listserv and the Slack on that topic. Additionally, we are planning to support the OCA CASP, that's Cybersecurity Automation Subproject, and we are planning to support their Plugfest in April, and that's Jane just put in there in the chat box. That's a big part why I thought it'd be good for us to have the March meeting, so that we can share the things that we're planning to bring to the April Plugfest for CASP. Right now, here at the lab, we have been building up a test environment with an Elastic Stack SIEM, as well as MITRE Caldera threat emulation platform, so that we could run through a simplified version of the Olympic Destroyer campaign and generate some log data that we can share with the other projects for CASP. That's coming along nicely, hoping in the next few weeks to be able to have those logs that we can share, so our good friends on projects like Kestrel and OpenC2 and Cacao can build some various elements that we can look to integrate together during the Plugfest. Are there any questions on those fronts? If not, I'll dive into our technical talk for the month. But thought I'd pause for a moment and see if anybody had some questions, comments, or concerns. Okay. I always take silence as concurrence, so I appreciate it. Today, I'd like to talk to you guys. As I said, we've done a lot of work, and grateful for all your contributions to help us on the overall design of the IOB construct. But we really feel that a lot of work will be needed, kind of based on Carter's talk from our last meeting, on actually using this in a few different places. And so towards that, we definitely recognize the need for tools that make it easier for folks to actually build and integrate indicators of behavior into their products and workflows. And so we wanted to take a moment to look at tools that could help analysts build these type of bundles without having to know Python or other programming languages, without them having to write code. We wanted to make it a little bit easier for people to create these Stix JSON bundles. So towards that, I'll put this link in the chat, and then I'll share my screen. One moment. Let's see if I can copy that. We started looking at a nice open source project called the Stix Modeler. I want to give credit where credit is due. So let me do a screen share. That is Jason Minnick's GitHub. And just make sure my audio is still working. So a few years ago, Jason Minnick stood up this project for a drag and drop Stix 2.1 modeler. And we found it pretty interesting. And what we've done is right now, internally, we've forked a copy of this project, and we've been doing some active development. It's our intent to eventually create a merge request, but we're still, what I'm going to show today is some kind of, I'd say, pre-alpha release modifications. We're very early on in the process, and we want to definitely do proper code review and cleanup before we propose anything as an update. But I'm going to show the folks on the call today some of the capabilities that we've been looking at adding onto this. The modeler itself is a nice drag and drop interface for building traditional Stix bundles where you can add data, create relationships, and export a Stix JSON. I'll show an example of some of that basic functionality, and then we'll go into how we've looked at extending this for some of our indicator of behavior work. So let me log into our demo environment today. And please feel free to interrupt or raise your hands if you have any questions. But the Stix Modeler is a Node.js application. And what I have loaded up here is one of our current branches of our internal development to add on to it. But what you'll see down here to begin with is a palette of different types of Stix domain objects. And so if one wants, you can just kind of drag it onto the palette. Clicking on an object gives you a dialog box where you can then enter text or whatever other fields you need according to the schema, and it will update and save it. I think it's a little easier to take a little bit more detailed example. So let me start with a clean palette. One thing we have is the ability to import a Stix bundle. So let me do that. Start with a very simplistic one. So what you'll see here is a very simple Stix bundle of a report that references an indicator. And so here is a simple indicator that marked as a potential C2 node for malicious activity. And right now it has a Stix pattern. And so showing an example, if I wanted to change that pattern, I can do that right through the dialog box. And just for argument, I'll say 2.3.4.5. Hit the plus sign, and that updates. And there's ability to import different kill change. This one by default has the old Lockheed. We've been working on some modifications that also incorporate MITRE ATT&CK kill chains. But what's nice is you can make those type of edits. We can also add a little bit more here. Let's say I wanted to make a course of action, and I'm just making this up. Give it a name. And we'll talk more about things like playbooks in just a second. But just starting, this is a standard STIX course of action object. And at that point, you also can drag and drop to create relationships. And the modeler knows the standard relationships between domain objects. And so you can select one of those, or you can create, we've added extensions to create custom relationships if you wish. And so we could have that. And then similarly, I can have our report here, reference the course of action, and maybe we want, I don't know, let's say a grouping object, and we want all these in a group. And one more for good measure. And what's handy is, as you saw, that was all done graphically, and we've now got a compliant STIX bundle here in the JSON format, all handled without somebody having to write a bit of code, any bit of code. So that's some of the basic functionality of the modeler. And we think that there are products that are working to do these type of capabilities, but we thought this was a nice open source example for those that are looking for something that can demonstrate and work with people that strictly uses STIX as the data model, as opposed to any particular threat intel platform's proprietary data model. Are there any questions on this part before I go into some of the ways that we've extended this to handle indicators of behavior and other types of objects? Alrighty. Well, in that case, one of the things that we realized is that we wanted to be able to look at other types of STIX domain objects because we've been making new extended ones under the IOB project. So that's where we've added the ability to also import extensions. So we can do some schemas. And let me, if you've written schemas for your extensions, you can add them in there. So for today, I'll show some behaviors, some detections, and playbook objects. And now those have been added. And now you'll see on the palette, there's some new ones. If you keep adding these, eventually this becomes a scrollable bar so that you can get to your other elements. Now, I'm a visual guy, so there's also the ability for us to change the browser icons. So I'll do those real quick. We're still, like I said, this is still very early in the process, so we're still working on some of the UI improvements. But I thought for today might be a good start. And an icon for behavior. So now you can see we have playbooks, detections, and behaviors. And what I'll do is import a very simplified behavior bundle just for today's demonstration to show you some of the things that we can do with this. Now, one of the things that's immediately on our to-do list is to go through and work on some of the graphical layout options. Obviously, it's a little messy to start off with. So it's on our punch list, but we'll be adding something like a force-directed layout and a hierarchical layout in the near future. These are the type of things we want to have cleaned up before we start a merge request, since right now we're focused more on the core functionality. But if folks can bear with me, I can clean this up pretty quickly for us. So I'm just gonna put a few things up here, and then we'll be able to see this picture a little bit better. So let's, well, I promise this won't be as, I know this is a little painful, but these are some of the things we're working on right now. And some detections. And if folks can bear with me, just for a little bit of simplicity's sake, I'm going to, all these items were connected into a grouping object. Just for today's discussion, I'm going to delete that grouping object for a moment, just to reduce the amount of overlapping lines. And I also appreciate your patience, because like I said, this is a little bit of a draft in progress, but this is a subset of our behavior bundle that we've been using, of just showing a browser downloading an Office macro, that macro executing commands, and a Cobalt Strike beacon communicating back to its server after that macro executed commands. There's a little duplication of lines here because when I was setting this up, I typed in lowercase and uppercase, and I didn't clean that up on my sample. But each one of these then ties to a detection analytic with a course of action that's now got a course of action to correlate the behaviors, a playbook for doing that correlation, and using that as a trigger for a quarantine and remediate workflow. And on any given one of these, again, we can now go into the editor, and now you can see the names, descriptions, class of behavior, techniques, and all those things that we were adding programmatically are now you can enter through the GUI. Similarly, I can take a detection and I can see that's a Sigma rule that's base64 encoded. And I can copy that. And let's open a new terminal. I'll blow this up a little so that we can see what I'm doing. And I can take that base64 string and decode it. And there's our Sigma rule from the detection. Similarly, I can go over here. I'll take the correlation workflow. And here's an example where we had the BPMN workflow. And I can do a similar thing there. I'm just going to so that we don't have to quite deal with as much mess on the screen. And I can decode that. And let's write that to a BPMN file. And then ideally, This is not an endorsement, but there is a web online BPMN viewer called BPMN.io. And I will open up the demo I just made. And there you can see our correlation workflow extracted and visualized from the editor. But another example we were looking at is maybe we started this project off, Kakao was still early in its, early on in its life. But now we've been working with the Kakao team to build out a Stix object for playbooks. Maybe we want to replace this with a Kakao playbook. And just showing that can be pretty straightforward. Can change the type. And I happen to have saved a base64 encoded playbook here. And that's all it takes to switch it from a BPMN playbook to a Kakao playbook. And all of this is now right here. And we've got a nice JSON object that's containing all that data plus the updated playbooks and relationships. And we can export that out. So pretty straightforward stuff, but just kind of showing that this is kind of the type of functionality we wanted to be able to use things. Also, just for good measure, I was going to try and open up the Kakao roaster, but I probably shouldn't try to run the two Node apps at the same time because I'm not sure on the different capabilities there. But if you take my word for it, the playbook opens just fine. I might be able to start the second one. I think I might have another machine ready. Yep. Pardon me a second. I meant to have this running, but so our good friends at the Kakao Roaster project had their release last month, and it works pretty well. So it's just taking a moment to load over here. But that BPMN, that Kakao JSON I just added in a base64 string, it decodes to this file right here, which we got our nice Kakao roaster. And see if I can get us a few. The goal was just trying to make this fit a little bit easier on the screen. But big thanks to Mateos and Vasilios. And you can see we can pull that stuff out and see everything nice and clean. So with that said, I know it's a little bit of a shorter, technical demo today, but I thought I'd kind of open this up. And Mateos is saying they now have an online version of the roaster, which is fantastic. Is that running off, Mateos, is that running off a like a GitHub page? Yes, it is. So that'd be handy. But so like I said, what I've shown you guys today probably isn't anything that might seem groundbreaking to y'all, but what we found is most of the threat intel platforms out there, it's difficult to have something that would just stick to the Stix standard, and very hard to get any that would process extensions, which is why we were excited about JSON Jason's project on GitHub and where we've been actively working on it. The current way forward for this, also I want to give credit. I see Hannah Ripley is in the on the call today. Hannah is one of our developers here at the lab, and she's been doing the vast majority of the development work on this for us. And we're adding some new stability features just to handle some of the basically stealing ideas from the Cacao roaster folks. We want to make it a little easier for you to manage your identity on this tool, as also give a few usability things for the layout and the grouping objects, so that eventually you could just multi-select a set of objects and create a sticks grouping and let it handle all those relationships for you automatically as well. Then after that is the very simple task of just making sure we've updated all of our dependencies over the last 4 years that this project's been worked on. And then we'll be pushing in a merge request to make this a little bit more available. Jane, yeah, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, would it make sense to try to upload the Olympic Destroyer data to, we have the JSON code that Jason sent us over. So if we upload it in JSON, could we then visualize it here?
We absolutely could. I don't know if I have that handy at this right on this virtual environment. This is inside a VPN in one of our test labs. But yeah,
I'll email it to you. Yeah, I'll email it to you. And then
sure. I've got it on this. I've got it on one of my computers. I just need to get it over to the right place.
Oh, okay.
So if we can, I'll just need a moment and we can visualize what was in there. I'll spare you guys having to watch me hunt. Let me pull that in real quick. But you kind of got to where I was getting at, Jane, which is the goal will be, we'll probably be using this during the CAS Plug Fest for us to edit the IOB bundle and rapidly insert things from the other teams as we go through that Plug Fest. And I'm just doing a little SCP magic here off screen to make it a little easier for us. Let's see. So we're doing a really live demo here. So let's see. While I do this, if anybody has a question, I'm just copying a file over into this environment.
It's not a question, but rather an observation. And that is,
Please.
A lot of the Stix implementations that I've seen have been very flat. And what I mean by this is that a lot of the implementers are defaulting to the indicator object rather than using the sort of robust data objects, SDOs and SCOs that we've developed. So that's why I was thinking it might be nice to take a look at the Olympic Destroyer data, because I think a lot of those are expressed as indicator objects.
I believe they are. And so one of the things that we are working on while we create those elastic logs, Jane, is we're also planning to bring a more dynamic IOB style bundle of representing the threat intel from the report. But we can take a look at what we've got at the moment. allow me to just bring that file over.
Thanks. I didn't mean to put
Oh,
you on the
sure.
spot here.
It's okay. Just
Missing a
checking
P
my
there,
spelling.
Charlie.
Thank you. Let's. Kurt knows this jump box
Too well.
very well. And let's see. OD samples, what I called it. Okay, so before I'll reset and import the example that we had so far. And I think you will see it being I think this one is a tad more of the flat style, but we will import it. It's taking up. Well, we'll see how it's going. Of course, the live demo of the untested JSON is not liking this very well. There it is. So this is a case where it was just kind of large. This is a good example of why we're working on the adding the force directed layout and a few things, but we did get it up there, and you can see we do have some attack patterns, and we can kind of go into some of that data. What we'll work on for CASP though is a little bit more structured version with frankly a lot less traditional indicators, because while this is all, we're glad to have this data to start with, what we really want to get back is translating the attack patterns more into to mapping them to the behavior objects and getting more into the detections that we can use, which I think will be a little bit handier for our efforts. And then we can also add in those course of actions and response playbooks. But I will just take a moment to be grateful that it didn't crash when I loaded the new object, and I'll just count my blessings.
So, Charlie, have you thought of maybe a toggle switch for filtering out? Like, for example, if you had a filter, you
To
could
turn off
toggle off all the indicators and then it would show a very different screen. Or you could
Yes.
have multiple sources that are, and then you could toggle by source.
Yes. Yeah, that is one of the things that we've been considering, Jane. And Hannah gets no shortage of feature requests from me. That's a little bit lower next on our list, but we'll after we get the layout going. But that absolutely would be one of the things. I mean, a large portion of what we're doing here is to have this as a reference, because eventually we would just like it if threat intel platforms were able to represent everything in the STIX standard and have some structured way for when somebody wanted to make custom objects to incorporate it. But yes, toggling some of those on and off would help clean up the picture quite a bit. Visualization wise, that is a feature in the STIX visualizer program. So like, now the problem is with the visualizer, it visualizes, but it doesn't edit. So I can, looks like it's taking a moment to load up. And so, yeah, I see exactly what you're getting at, Jane, is that you could very much simplify some of this and like and get a much more different graph. So this type of this type of filtering and display would be the type of things that we would be interested in doing. We just want to also be able to edit and change these values. So that's a big part of why we're looking at a modeler instead of just the viewer. We also could do some of this with our Neo4j work, but we wanted something that didn't require, that was a little bit more standalone and easier for people to interact with without having to run any additional code. So there we have it. With that, unless there's any other questions that people would like to see on this, I'll stop the screen share and just open this up for some Q&A for a moment.
So Charlie, what's the thought on getting time in this?
So you want to see that, like seeing this graph change over time?
No, this does. If I look at this, I have to assume it represents a set of events that happened over a period of time, but there's no time. So I don't know what was the first. I don't know what was the last. I don't know what the state transitions are.
Yeah.
I can't see any of what would appear to be the progression of this process. But have you thought about doing that?
Yes. Well, we have. Now, that's getting into more of a generic sticks discussion, but what you could use is the campaign feature and mark the sequencing there. And the good friends at Unit 42 did a great example of that. Let's see if I can, when you're trying to capture this over time, where this is another visualization of sticks data. Let's see if I can find one that has a few elements. We'll try prying, but yeah. But here's a case where they break it out on different campaigns, and you can get different representations, and then see data that would tie into each piece there. But for the modeler, Carter, right now what we've been doing is modeling the sequence. When we represent the behaviors, we add a kind of time sequencing that I was showing in the earlier example with the what occurs before what. And so our intent is to sticks, you can represent almost anything you'd like to in CTI, but what we've been doing this work for is so that we can look over those events and start building out a more generic set of behaviors and track some of the timing between them. And then the logic for how you would correlate between detections is the detail that we've been adding into the correlation objects, if that helps clarify how we're looking at incorporating time.
Yeah, because I mean, if I'm looking at an entire enterprise with a tool like this,
Yeah.
I probably am going to have dozens of halfway there states, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you know, so the ability to realize that something's progressing is the most important part. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to use the visualization and map it to, you know, like what's the current posture or state or whatever.
Yeah. And a lot of that would be the timestamps with the campaigns is how it's been, the folks that have done it, that's how they've been doing it more traditionally, and then letting additional data visualization tools bring that out. I'm not thinking that the visualizer is going to, that the modeler is going to replace all your enterprise tips. But what I did like about this is it helps show the pieces that we think are missing from tips so that it can help maybe help inspire some folks that might be interested in adding more stick support to the product to understand why we might like that. Okay. I will stop the screen share for a moment. And I know that, and I'll definitely, you know, I think some of the timeline parts we can incorporate, but I've also thought this would be a nice thing to have to CASP as OCA is starting to expand more, that there are some folks involved that are doing a lot in the tip space. And so I thought this could be a nice way to help share some of the things that we find useful in our analysis to make it work a little better for them. So I appreciate everyone's time for that. And again, just want to give the big thanks to Jason Minnick for starting this project and Hannah Ripley for all that she's been doing to help us modify it. That said, are there any additional questions on this front?
Well,
Alrighty.
one
Go
question
ahead.
I had, so it's really a lot, very impressive and a massive amount of work. So what's the next step? What are you guys doing next? So we can think about what you guys are thinking about.
So, like you said, a lot of what we're doing next, besides like some of the little visual layout on the modeling front, is a lot of the grunt work we got to do we want to go with a project, kind of pulling up a project that it's been kind of sitting on hiatus for a little while. As everybody here knows, there's a lot of compatibility and updating and cleanup to do just to make sure that some of the dependencies line up. Towards that, we're also building SBOMs for everything that we're developing. In the spirit of playing nice, trying to keep up to date with what some of our friends on the PACE project are doing. Don't know if we'll be able to release a SBOM implementing everything from PACE in it or not yet. But the big focus that we have, Carter, is now looking at more applications of actually trying to use this. So CASP is our first big plug fest to try and take all these pieces and put them together towards something where we could ideally embed this in with the Kestrel Hunt books and the Cacao playbooks and send those to maybe something like the OpenC2 orchestrator and actually show this thing detecting and responding to threats. But also, I'll say we're actively looking for quite a few opportunities to do some work that's closer to operational pilots. And so towards that, we're working on a couple other representations on a few more modern threat campaigns. And then, as I know you're familiar, Carter, we're also looking at some alternate ways of using the behavior detection construct to look at more dynamically defined behaviors and look how we can capture. And I think that's a big part of where the timing is going to come in that you were talking about. That's kind of early on in our investigations. But finding some more places where we can start trying to use this in demonstrate why the value and then more in operations is where we'd like to be taking the project next as we get the new revisions shared. If that answers the question.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool. And like I said, it's a massive amount of work. So
yeah. And we'll be trying to give Hannah some help on that updating and maintenance part of all the back end. Because as you can imagine, it's quite a few packages running behind the scenes to make this thing work. But that's kind of where some of our current work is going. And Kurt, I don't think I should be the only one on the spot. Are there any other major IOB elements that I've grossly forgotten to mention?
I can't think of anything that you've forgotten.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll be
Good.
showing off lots of stuff in the CASP, modeling a lot of the IOB stuff for Olympic Destroyer. So that'll be a great representation.
Yes, I need to start writing those. And then we've been focused heavily on trying to get just the Caldera run throughs in our environment so we can get all those elastic logs so that hopefully our friends in Kestrel can have some data they can build analytics for. And then we will embed their analytics. But that said, I know we're kind of a little bit earlier end today, but that was everything that we had to share. If there are any additional topics that folks would like to bring up, I'll wait another hot beat to see if someone has something to say. Okay, in that case, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll see everybody at the March meeting, which should be our last one for a little while. And I thank you all for your time. Let me now see if I can actually stop the recording.